The entrance that we use today wasn't an original entrance, so we're kind of having a little bit of artificial lighting coming down from it. But just to describe some of the conditions, so this is more along the lines of what the original lighting conditions would have been in these tunnels. Now, I explained that men didn't really sleep down in these tunnels. The only exception to that really was basically right before the battle. Men were housed, around 1,000 men were housed in this tunnel for about 36 hours before the battle took place. So you can imagine men shoulder to shoulder in conditions of really growing fear and tension. I haven't shown you a bathroom down here, and that's because these tunnels weren't meant to house men. So when they were living here for those 36 hours, they used buckets that lined the walls. And I'm sure you can imagine that in these dim lighting conditions, that often those buckets would be tossed over by mistake or knocked over. So the smell in these tunnels would have been quite extreme and quite pungent. And you can imagine that the tension really would have been building because your friend that's on your left and on your right, most likely at the end of that first day of battle, either yourself or that man, your friend, are not going to be alive. So really, they're coming up into the unknown on the day of a battle. So just watch your eyes as I turn back on the lights. And I'm going to make my way back up to the front of the line, and we're going to continue on. And now we're heading back towards the front.
That's why we point everything up above, so that everyone realizes we're actually walking everything.
Now, one of the big problems with these containers is that it was also used to store the same type of liquid. Any guesses? Petrol, or what we call in North America gasoline. Now, the only difference between a can that was used for water and one that was used for gasoline was a different colored lid. Now, I just shut off the lights for you guys. I'm sure you can imagine that on several occasions there were mistakes made in cans that had previously been used for gasoline or still contained a little bit of gasoline were now used for water. And so on top of the other hundreds of things that soldiers had to deal with on a daily basis, they also complained that their tea and their water tasted of a faint, taste of gasoline or petrol. So really not all that enjoyable. So now we can get to some of these neat rusted objects in front of me. And sometimes people have
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
This huge mine, and there was some debate as to when to blow it. Some people wanted to blow it several hours before 0 hour, and others wanted to blow it at 0 hour itself. So they came to a compromise and decided to blow the mine at 7:20 a.m. and then the battle would commence at 7:30 a.m. So at 7:20 they set off this mine crater in the hopes that this would cause confusion amongst the German soldiers and that they'd be able to go in and take the crater and have a good position from the mouth of the crater to fire upon the German soldiers and still have a good effect with their artillery going over the top. This unfortunately didn't happen. The German soldiers were quite adept at taking craters once they've been blown. The German division that was located on the other end of the site was a professional division, the Württemberg division it was called, and they had been here for 2 years. They were battle seasoned soldiers, highly trained in a professional capacity, whereas the Newfoundlanders, as I said before, were volunteer soldiers who had never actually had a whole lot of battle experience. So the German soldiers were able to rally together quite quickly. In the 10-minute window between 7:20 and 7:30, they were able to band their infantry together, and when the British soldiers came out over the top from their front lines, the German soldiers were ready for them. The German soldiers had noticed a high increased percentage of British soldiers coming onto the site. They had noticed significantly more artillery bombardment, and they had also noticed the British cutting holes in their barbed wire. So they knew something was coming, and the explosion of this mine just cemented the fact in and gave them an approximate time of when the battle was going to start. So when the British soldiers came out through the previously cut holes in their barbed wire, the German soldiers had their machine guns and their artillery ready. There were 5 machine gun positions on the field. One was about between the gap in the trees that you see in this direction. A second was straight ahead near the monument, that's right there. A third in about the direction of the winding path you can see. And then a fourth and a fifth through the gap in the trees in this direction. So the German soldiers had these 5 machine gun positions. So what they could do is they could open a line of enfilade fire. So they just pointed their guns in an arc, and they were able to spread an arc of bullets right across the whole expanse of no man's land. Machine guns at the time had a range of about 3 kilometers, so the German soldiers could have been up to 3 kilometers away with their machine gun positions, so relatively safe, and just firing on the lines of British soldiers. So that's what happened. As I said, the first line went over, suffered about 300 casualties out of the size of a battalion, which is roughly 1,000 men. Then the second line went over. Of course, this would have happened in waves that were already predetermined before the battle. So the second wave goes over, and they lose about 600 soldiers to casualties. And because, as I said previously, communication was so